Right, hello and welcome to part 2 of patterning for beginners on a knitting machine. Now then, what we're going to do today is we're going to look at slip stitch. Now again, I don't want you to worry too much about how we select the needles. There will be a whole video about different ways to select the needles. I'm just using this particular machine which has one particular way of doing it. But I think in order to get started, what we ought to do is just do some slip stitch. So the first thing we're going to do, if I take you over here, is we're going to click in both buttons on our carriage for slip stitch. If you're using a Knitmaster, there'd be a turny dial here and you would turn it to the relevant setting there. I can't remember what it's called. I think it might be marked S, but it's different on different machines. If you're using a Toyota, we're back to pushing the buttons again. Okay, I will talk about Knitmasters later and the differences and similarities. So we've pushed the slip stitch button, and if you remember, what that is going to do is precisely nothing. Okay, we are doing no knitting. So as I said, unless we're Dardaists, we want to have some needles in upper working position forwards and some needles not. Now, we're going to start off with the very simplest slip stitch of all, which is to do one by one, like polka dots. Okay, so I'm going to bring every other needle forwards, like so, and I'm going to knit a row. Okay, oh, and I've left an enormous loop there, and that is because I was paying attention to the video and not to the tension of the yarn when I passed it over. Sorry about that. We're going to ignore that. Okay, I'm going to carry on, and I'm going to bring back every other needle forwards, like so, and we're going to carry on like that for 10 rows, okay? So there's 10 rows. Now, for comparison, I'm now going to knit 10 rows of completely plain knitting, and then we'll compare the two. Right, let's have a look. Now, what do we notice? Well, firstly, we will notice that the 10 rows of slip stitch takes up approximately half the depth of 10 rows of normal knitting. And the reason for that is, of course, we're ignoring every other needle. And then we're going back and ignoring every other needle, which means that effectively 2 rows of knitting is actually only 1 row of loops made. You make half the loops going left and then the other half the loops going right. The other thing you'll notice is that we've got all these little floats. Okay, so that means that this knitting is thicker. And the back of the knitting, the stuff that's facing us, is the, quotes, right way round. Okay, that's quite a good way of making a nice thick a material if you're making a nice thick jersey, but it's not much of a pattern, is it? So let's see if we can do some sort of patterning which actually does an actual pattern on the machine. And the answer is you absolutely can. Okay, so what you can do is you can bring forward, let's say, we'll bring forward just 2 needles out of every 8, and then we'll zigzag it around an awful lot, okay? So, in fact, can you see I'm bringing everything apart from 2 needles out of every 8, because don't forget the needles that are forwards are the ones that knit. So let's do that, okay? Lovely, okay, and then if I shift it across and carry on doing it, so what I'm doing is I'm moving the 2 needles that I'm slipping across each time. Now, if I go back again, and you'll notice I've also caught one in here, sorry, I'm really not paying attention as I should, but that's not really the point. Okay, what you'll notice I've done is I have knitted a sort of zig of slips going that way and a zig of slips going that way. Okay, so that is broadly what slip stitch is very good at, is just making patterns on the knitting as you do it. So I guess it would be useful for us to know what the limits of that are. Then you can design your own slip stitch patterns. So the first thing to say is, let's talk about having needles, more than one needle next to each other. Hold on, I'm just going to knit a few rows to get us out of this. Okay, right. So we've got some nice plain knitting here. Now, what would happen if you had lots and lots of needles next to each other, all slipping at once? So let's try that, okay? We've got 4 needles knitting, 4 needles slipping, 4 needles knitting, 4 needles slipping. Let's see what happens there. Okay, now you can't quite see it, so we will carry on and do a few more rows. And I'm reversing which ones I slip each time. Oh, who can spot what I've done wrong? I haven't pressed the slip buttons. My fault. Never mind, let's try this again. Oh, there we go. I may have just hit the camera there, sorry. Now, again, let's knit some of that out. Now, that's fine, it's worked. There's nothing wrong with that, but the problem is that we've left quite long floats across the front of the knitting that we've ignored. And that's absolutely fine, except that could quite easily, look at that, could quite easily get caught on stuff. So it's not generally a good idea to have more than, say, 2 needles, maybe 3, slipping next to each other without having a normal knit needle in between. So when you're designing patterns, I would keep them just to 1 or 2 needles slipping at a time. Now let's think about the other way. Let's think about slipping vertically. What happens if you just carry on with the same needle slipping all the time? Okay, so for this one, we'll just have a couple of needles slipping, okay? And what we're going to do is, I'm not going to shift it at all. We're just going to slip it and slip it and slip it and see what happens, okay? So let's do 1 row. And that's fine, that's slipped no problem. Same needle slipping again. So it's slipping vertically at this point. Now, can you see what's starting to happen is that the needles that we're slipping over are not getting any longer, but the rest of the knitting is getting longer. And at some point or other, that's going to be a problem because we're going to create uneven areas of tension and it's going to start falling apart. Okay, let's carry on a few more times. Ooh, we are getting dodgy here, but we're going to try it, okay? Couple more, let's see what happens. Oof. Okay, that is, can you see there's this big bunching up going on here? Now, that's not actually necessarily a problem. You can make a feature of that. Let me just knit this out. And we'll have a look. Now let's have a look at this and see. So, what you can see is, we've actually ended up pulling this knitting quite tight and creating a little bulge there and a little taut bit there. Now, this is possibly not the best machine to demonstrate this on because this machine is unbelievably forgiving and you can get away with lots. But on quite a lot of machines, Knitmasters especially, you don't want to slip for, 10, 12 rows in the same needle at once. Quite a lot of books will tell you not to slip at all more than 2 or 3 rows. Okay, now you can get away with it, and let's see if I can just lift this up and show you what it looks like on the other side. Can you see most of the slip stitch just doesn't look like anything very much? You can just about see the zigzags there. But this one, you can see it started to create a sort of overly bobble shape, which is actually quite cool. And if you get that right, and you've got the right machine, and you'll have to try on your own individual machine, that literally different machines, even of the same make and model, vary. But if you get that right, you can create quite a nice sort of bunched up effect. So let me see if I can do that. This machine I've only just finished servicing and restoring, so I don't know if it will work. But we're going to try we're going to try just one stitch and we're going to slip it loads, okay? So let's see how far we can take it before it complains. Can you see, if you have a look there, can you see this stitch is being pulled longer and longer and longer, okay? Oh, that's 8, okay? We are getting dodgy here. Okay, I think that's where I'm going to run out. But now if I do a plain row, you can clearly see that we've really bunched the knitting up there. Okay, we've really pulled it through. And again, if I lift it up and we have a look, you can see that we've got this one stitch that's been pulled all the way up. So you just need to be aware of that. You can design that into your pattern, but can you see it hasn't worked very well here for a start? It's created a blooming great hole. So you need to be careful when you do that. And you might want to hand select the end stitches so that they always knit if you're going to do wild stuff like that. But that is your basic slip stitch. It's ignoring stitches. You can create whatever pattern you like. My advice is not more than 2 slip stitches next to each other and not more than 4 or 5 rows of the same needle being slipped all the time, unless you want to create that effect. And if you do want to create that effect, it can be quite cool. So that's the end of the slip stitch thing. We will go into more details as to how you might adapt this when you get to a punch card machine and stuff. But for the moment, that slip stitch is done, and I shall see you in episode 3 when we talk about tuck stitches. See you next time. Bye.